Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session on preparing for the Google Cloud Professional Data Engineer certification. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager for the Google Cloud community. Joining us today are Andrew and Carrie, who will be taking us through the content and answering your questions. Questions are encouraged, so please feel free to add those into the YouTube chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them either in the chat or at the end of the presentation. We did get a few pre-submitted questions today, so we will be covering those first. And thank you everyone for sharing where you're joining us from: Michigan, India, Vietnam. It's great to see you from all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us. And with that, I will hand it over to you to take us through the content today.
Okie dokie. Awesome. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Carrie Browde. We can go to the next slide. I'll give a brief overview of our agenda. I'll be talking a little bit about Google Cloud certification, just what it is, why you might want to get certified, how it works. And then actually Andrew is going to take over from me because he's the brains behind this operation. He knows all about being a data engineer and the certification. So he'll talk about how it works, how to best prepare, and then we will answer your questions. Hooray. So we can go to the next slide. And what is Google Cloud certification? That's a great question. Google Cloud certification is an exam, and you get a certification, and it is a really robust and trustworthy way to validate your experience, your competency in a Google Cloud related job role. So today we are discussing the Google Cloud Professional Data Engineer certification. We can go to the next slide. This particular certification is 2 hours in length. There's 50 to 60 multiple choice, multiple select questions. We do have sample questions on the website, and you can see the link there, cloud.google.com/certification. You can also go /FAQ, find even more answers there. You can take all of our exams, including the data engineer certification, either online or at a Criterion testing center, which is really great. I love that flexibility. I personally get really nervous about tests, and being able to take it at my home in my little environment makes it really great for me. But I've worked in certification for a while, and I know a lot of people love going to testing centers. So you get to choose what's best for you. There is a registration fee. It is $200, and we are offering this exam in both English and Japanese. The exam is valid for 2 years after you pass, and when you pass, you'll get more information about how to renew, but you have about a 6-month window to renew around the time of your expiration. Okay, we can go to our next slide, and we're going to talk about Actually, I think, Andrew, I'm so sorry. I think I am one slide behind you. Thank you so much. The which Google Cloud certification is right for you. Awesome. Perfect. So this data engineer certification is a professional certification. We recommend having a little bit of experience in the job role before attempting the certification. Also, definitely leveraging the exam preparation resources that are on the website. You're here, so you're already doing a great job of leveraging resources by attending this session, but we do have a lot more supplemental resources available in a lot of different modalities, depending on what your learning style is. And again, as I mentioned, this is a professional certification. We also have our foundational certification. Right now, we only have one. It's the Cloud Digital Leader. And then we have an associate certification, which also we recommend having been in the job role for a while, perhaps a little less time. But again, you can go through the exam resources and get yourself up to speed. The foundational certification, if there are any of you today who are on the call because you aren't in cloud yet, but are looking to transition in or just curious, I definitely recommend consuming some of that material because it really helps give you the language around the processes and tools and products that we use in Google Cloud. But a lot of you are here for the data engineer certification, so you already know all that. So professional certification, that's the one for you. And now we can go to our next slide, the Navigating the Cloud Journey. And this is how you can see kind of our different professional certification paths. You'll see here that we have the data engineer certification under the data and analytics path. I'm personally a big fan of data analytics. This is one of our, I think, 8 professional certifications. So if another one interests you, please feel free to search for those resources. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew so he can continue telling you about the data engineer certification.
Thanks, Carrie. So obviously today we're talking about professional data engineer certification. And here is giving you a high level of who a data engineer actually is. I think the definition might vary from person to person, but we've defined it in a longer fashion on our website. But just to narrow it down, we're calling that someone who enables data-driven decision-making by collecting, transforming, and publishing data. So this exam actually assesses your ability to design, build, operationalize, and secure data processing systems. I'm not going to read every single one of these bullet points, but basically you should be familiar with data engineering operations and tools, and also be able to apply those into a Google Cloud environment. The recommended experience, like Carrie I think mentioned before, there aren't actually any necessary prerequisites, but 3+ years of industry experience, including a year of designing and managing solutions in Google Cloud, is recommended. So this is really, it's kind of a broad level, right? So I should be able to choose and pick the products as a data engineer to make a pipeline, and also after I make that pipeline, be able to monitor and secure that pipeline. So it is a high-level exam. We'll talk about more of the guide and get into more of the details of what you should exactly know. But at a high level, this is who a data engineer is. So I think, Carrie, I'll pass it off to you for why should I get certified?
Excellent. Why Google Cloud certification? Why should you get certified? So I'm going to tell a real quick story. Personally, I did not start off in tech. I started off in children's entertainment, weirdly. But I found that when I moved into tech, and I did start at a data analytics company, and I was a literature major, so I have a lot of writing experience, and I loved it, and it was great, and I liked the environment, but I felt a little unsure of what I needed to catch up on. And studying for and taking 2 certification exams helped my psychological safety so much. It was amazing. So that honestly is my favorite reason, but there are some more popular, or let's say glamorous reasons, like swag. You do get swag when you pass a certification. You also get to join our cloud certified group in the Google Cloud community, where you can network with other certified folks. You have access to Googlers. We do lots of sessions about various things related to certification. Hopefully soon we'll be doing a recruitment and resume session. That'll be really nice. But yeah, I think that certification is just really great for increasing your confidence. And when you increase your confidence, obviously it also increases confidence of others in you. So whether you're looking to transition your career, advance in your current career, or just gain validation in hopes that you can, I don't know, I guess have a little bit more mastery of your specific career focus, I think certification is an excellent way to do that. Also, as you can see in that middle little box there, it does help financially. We do see that people who get Google Cloud certifications often enter into job roles that are much more high paying than jobs they were in previously. And in fact, I have a fun number. 70% of people who applied for a new job with a Google Cloud certification received at least one job offer for that role. Or for the role. So that's amazing. 70% is, that's great. Very excited about that. And Andrew, I think we can go to the next slide. All right. And so we're going to talk about how certification works. So when you register for your exam, You'll use that website that we showed earlier, and we'll put it in the chat again, probably a few more times throughout this session. And you will need to create an account in the exam delivery service that we use, which is Criterion Web Assessor. You can find a testing center near you if you want to take it in person, or like I said earlier, you can also opt into a online exam and schedule your testing date and time. You do receive a lot of confirmation messages about your registration, but I also absolutely recommend creating your own calendar event. You're allowed to log in about 15 minutes before your exam if you're taking it online. And I do recommend that. The way we do exam delivery virtually is a little bit different than other companies. We have our own dedicated proctors. So it can sometimes take a little bit longer than you might be used to if you've taken other online exams before, to have the proctor go through the pre-event checklist with you, which is why I recommend logging in early. But they're really great and efficient at their job. So hopefully you'll get in there pretty quickly without too many hiccups. There's also a pre-event, another checklist of things you need prepared for you. The one I like to shout out always is don't forget to bring your ID, and don't forget to bring your ID that matches your name on your registration of your account. I have a hyphenated last name. I did not do that the first time, and it was a little bit of a headache. So try to call that out whenever possible. All right, I think we can go to the next slide.
I think
and I will pass it to you, Andrew.
All right, thanks, Carrie. Before I get started, I think I should do a little introduction, but my name is Andrew Fleischer. Based out of Austin, Texas. I'm a cloud data warehouse engineer in our professional services team. I'm pretty familiar with the exams. I've taken 10 of our exams, and I also lead cohorts of people to take the exam for themselves. So I'm super excited to be talking about some of the tips that we have for the professional data engineer. And first thing I'm going to show you is a pop quiz. I'm just kidding, but this is just some example structure of a question. So like Carrie mentioned, there's going to be 50 to 60 questions on the exam. And so it's really important that you maybe familiarize yourself with the structure of each question and what that will actually look like, right? So here's an example of a question. You can read it through, but you don't have to actually answer it or anything like that. I'm just putting this up here to kind of get the structure of the questions down, right? What are you actually looking at when you're taking the exam? So if I move on, there's kind of a formalized structure to each question, right? So every single question is going to start with a setup. And in this case, the setup was that Bigtable database has recently been deployed into production, but the performance has degraded. So these setups that they give you, they're usually very applicable to the real world. They'll try to come up with an example. Your team is trying to accomplish X or Y. So usually these are very real world situations. But you do have to familiarize yourself and understand the setup in order to understand the follow-ups to the question, right? Next part of the question is the goal, right? So they've given you the setup, your performance is degraded, and your goal is that you want to identify the performance issue. The goal could have been something else. It could have been that you want to fix it. It could have been that you had something other goal that you wanted to accomplish. But in this case, you just want to identify the performance issue. And so when you're reading these setup and goals, it's really important to pay attention to the verbs that they use and the exact language that they're using. So a lot of the times people, I think, get tripped up on the specific words that they're using, but you have to pay very close attention to what they actually want you to do. In this case, it's actually to identify the performance issue. After the goal comes the actual question, right? In this case, it's very simple. It's what should you do? In other cases, it might be more complicated. It could be what should you do to increase performance, to do X or Y. But in this case, it's what should you do? So we just kind of broke down that previous question into its 3 separate components, but that's something that you will have to do in basically every single question, right? Maybe it would help to identify what is the setup here, what is my goal, and finally, what is the question? What am I actually trying to accomplish? If you were curious in that previous one, the answer was A. But I'm going to go over some general test taking tips. So we just kind of went over the example question structure. But these are some of the tips, just general for any of the exams, actually, not only for the PDE. But one of the first test taking tips is try to anticipate the correct answer before looking at the options. So in that case, when you read the question, If you have enough experience and knowledge, maybe you can start to generate some thoughts about what can I think about? What am I looking for in the answer? And for me, that really helps to build the confidence. If I'm already thinking of something in my mind as I'm reading the question, and then I actually see that in the options, it gives me a lot of confidence that maybe that is the right answer that I should choose. My next tip here is that all options are plausible, but only one will meet all the specifications called out in the question. And this is actually super important to understand. So in the previous example that I gave, there were 4 different options, right? And all of those options are plausible. So when you're taking the test, all the options that you're given are technically feasible, meaning that they're not going to give you a product that doesn't exist in one of the options and just try to throw you completely off. They're not going to give you an option that would result in an error. So that means all of the previous other 3 options in that question, those are technically things that you can do. If I actually go back to B, C, and D, B, C, and D are things that you can accomplish in Google Cloud if you wanted to, right? Like they're not going to throw an error. They're not things that you can't possibly do. But A is the answer that actually answers the question in the best possible way. So another just an important tip that every single option is plausible, but only one will meet all the specifications called out in the question, which makes it a little bit tougher, actually. So the third tip here is there's no penalty for guessing. So try not to leave any questions unanswered. And then the fourth one is to mark questions for review if you don't know after 5 minutes. So these kind of go together, but when you're taking the exam and in the software that you take the exam, you can actually mark that question for review. So if you're taking a little bit longer, I would suggest to just mark it for review and then come back to that question at the end when you know you have time left. They generally give you, I think it's 2 hours for 50 to 60 questions. So that's generally around 2 to 3 minutes per question, but you should have ample enough time to actually finish the exam. Okay, so we kind of went over some general test taking tips, but let's go over some kind of specific things for the professional data engineer. And so this is kind of a complete formalized guide, in my opinion. It's kind of a list of steps that you would need to accomplish to actually take the steps to pass the exam. So one is to set your exam date, and it's hard to give people a hard suggestion in terms of timeline, but 3 to 4 weeks at least in advance would be advised. Even if you're someone who's already familiar with data engineering and you're already familiar with Google Cloud, it's going to take some time to really study and nail those things down that maybe you haven't reviewed in a while. We're going to talk about the official courses that we have, but and specifically our Coursera course is designed to be completed in 3.5 months at 5 hours per week. So if that's like a general guidance that you want to have in your mind, then that's kind of what we could suggest. And so you should schedule the exam early on and block off time in your calendar to focus on reviewing content. Number 2 here would be to just register. And I would suggest to just set that exam date when you've decided that you want to actually take the exam. I would just suggest to just go ahead and actually schedule it out. So just like if you schedule like a marathon a couple months out, you would want to do the same thing here so that you feel more motivated and you're not just going to keep studying and never feel like you're actually going to take the exam. So I would suggest just setting a date for yourself and sticking to it. Number 3 here is to review the exam guide. So this is going to be kind of like your golden resource for the exam. Every single one of our professional exams and all of the exams have an exam guide, and it's going to have your actual topics, your products, and the things that you need to know for the exam. So it's obviously a very good resource. And I would actually suggest that you go line by line through that exam guide and make sure that you're at least familiar with what that is actually talking about. And if there are products or things that you don't understand in that exam guide, that's definitely a sign that you should go and take that and research it a little bit more. So exam guide is super important. I would pull that up and start taking a look at it if you're interested in taking this exam. Number 4 is the data engineering learning path. So this is kind of all of I'm going to go into more detail in the next slide, but we have a lot of structured content and prepared curated content for you to actually learn this. The things that you need to know to become a data engineer. So Google Cloud Skills Boost, Coursera, Pluralsight, Google Cloud documentation. We're going to go a little bit more into that, but next step is to actually do that studying. So video content, actually doing labs, all of that stuff is great, and we're going to go into more details. Number 5, review the sample questions. So just like there's an exam guide for every single exam, there's also sample questions. So I would suggest that you actually take sample questions immediately when you decide that you want to take the exam, because it's going to help you test your knowledge, gauge where you're at. Maybe you don't know anything and you get them all wrong, which is okay. Or maybe you say, oh, I actually know a little bit more. And then I also suggest that you take the sample questions a little bit before that you take the exam. So maybe a few days before you take the exam, do the sample questions again and say, okay, and these are the final things that I need to review, and hopefully you're getting a little bit more right. But those are extremely valuable. So you're actually getting real world, knowledge before you take the exam. And then number 6, take and pass exam. Carrie just mentioned all the cool swag and things that you get. So hopefully you would pass. So moving on to the structured content here. So I know there's a lot on the slide, and I'm just going to point out immediately, we're going to be focusing on what's in the left-hand side. So the left-hand side is someone who wants to become a professional data engineer, which is what we're talking about today. But maybe you're watching this presentation and you actually want to become a data analyst. Well, we still have paths for that. Even if it doesn't lead to the actual certification, there is a path and training material for being a data analyst or like a BI role. But what we want to focus on is what's on the left-hand side, which is the trainings for a data engineer. And so I know the text is pretty small, but it does have links to several different platforms that we have for trainings. And I'm not going to read every single one out, but just to get the gist of it, you can sign up for something like Coursera, which is video content, and will also include training lab material. So like I mentioned before, there's actually a path for the professional data engineer. It's a curation of courses for Coursera or Pluralsight, and that's designed to be 3.5 months at 5 hours per week. And so here are some examples of the trainings that you would actually take is something like big data and machine learning fundamentals, data engineering in Google Cloud, serverless data processing and data flow. So these are all great courses for you to prepare. So like I mentioned, that's actually mostly video content. But something that's extremely useful is the Skills Boost. So that's the SB in this slide. So Skills Boost is a platform where you can actually run tests in GCP. So basically you get a lab environment, you get a testing environment for a limited amount of time, and you can use that environment to build the products that, build the pipelines that you need to build. And the labs will actually give you instructions on what you need to do. So they might say, make a pipeline with Java and Dataflow, or make a data warehouse in BigQuery. And you can actually go in and do that. So you're actually getting hands-on knowledge rather than just like watching videos or reading or something like that. And then finally, when you've done all of that training material, like I mentioned before, you should definitely take a look at the exam guide and the sample questions, and then you can finally take the exam. So this is more of our structured learning path. But what I also want to mention is additional study materials and resources. So the last slide was what I would call more formal or structured resources. And this is what I would say are more just like additional, more unstructured content, but they're still amazing resources to learn for this exam. The first one is product documentation. So like I mentioned, if you're looking through that exam guide and you're seeing products that maybe you've never heard of, we have a lot of products, I would just suggest that you go look through our documentation and actually learn the things through the documentation. So it's useful to click around in there to get used to what does this product do, what are the use cases, what are the different features. We have extensive documentation on all of our products. The second resource here is YouTube. So we have a Google Cloud Tech YouTube channel, which is my personal favorite resource for learning. And so if you basically type in any single product into our YouTube channel and you search for it, you're going to find tech talks basically on everything. And so if I was interested in something like BigQuery or Dataflow, I would just type that into our YouTube. And you can find extended long talks about real use cases with customers and real world examples. And so this was really useful for me just to get that context, just to get that real life knowledge that's, in my opinion, a little less dry, a little less formal than the previous resources. The third resource here is the Google Cloud community. So if you want to connect with other people who are taking the exam or other people who want to learn Google Cloud, or if you want to learn about some upcoming talks, the Google Cloud community page is a great resource for that. We also have, we endorse an O'Reilly Data Engineer Study Guide book. So if you're someone who maybe enjoys reading or you learn better through a book, I would suggest buying this book. And it actually provides sample questions and a full study guide within more of a structured content like that. So the last resource here, if you're someone who's watching this who's a partner, we actually have a specific partner learning link, which will be sent out. But you can use this to connect to all of your partner resources. Okay, so those were additional study guides. And so what I want to get into now are more of study tips, my personal tips for what's on the exam, and more specifically, the PDE. So my first tip here is to understand open source versus GCP managed tools. So this slide kind of puts that into perspective here. So in the data engineering world, you have your open source ecosystem with a lot of open source tools that many data engineers commonly use. And a lot of the times, especially in data engineering, they actually have an equivalent within Google Cloud, but they're just managed. So I think the open source tools that are here, I'm not going to go through every single one of them and explain every single one, but the top two here, right? Like, so if you're someone who's coming from the Hadoop ecosystem, maybe you want to run a Hadoop cluster or you want to run Spark jobs, you can kind of think of Google Cloud Dataproc as the managed solution. So you can run a managed Dataproc cluster within Google Cloud in the same way that you could run it on premises, but all of that management is done for you. So if you see something on the exam, maybe it's mentioning Hadoop, but you can kind of map that in your mind to something like Dataproc. Same thing with Apache Beam, right? So like a batch and streaming transformation. If you're someone who maybe uses Beam and you use that on your direct runner, you use that with a different runner on your laptop or whatever it may be, our managed solution in Google Cloud is actually Dataflow. So it's really just mapping what's open source into what is that equivalent within Google Cloud. Same with Airflow. You can run Airflow DAGs within Google Cloud using Composer. And the same things goes for the particular tools I have listed out for PubSub and Bigtable. So they're not exactly one-to-one matches, but you can kind of make this mapping in your mind. Maybe if you have experience with the open source tools, but this is kind of what's equivalent within GCP. So it's really useful when you're going through the exam. Maybe you're used to these open source tools, and maybe you can kind of diagram that in your mind to, okay, this is what the option is for the question that they're asking me. Okay. Next tip here is to understand common data engineering patterns. And so this is just an example that I have on here, but within the data engineering ecosystem, there's common patterns, maybe like ETL or ELT, that you should definitely be familiar with if you're moving to Google Cloud, and you should know the equivalent if you're taking this exam. I put one particular pattern on here, and I actually have the link to this YouTube video that we'll put out. But the pattern is real-time streaming analytics. So a common pattern we see with customers is that maybe they have some real-time data coming through, and they want to immediately get insights on that data to make decisions. And so we actually have a 3-product pairing that works well for this particular use case. And so in this case, it's like Google Cloud PubSub for ingesting that data into a messaging queue, and then using Cloud Dataflow to transform that data, and then finally landing that data into BigQuery. And so thank you for linking the video. And I would highly suggest that you watch this particular video because it does come up as an extremely important use case. So yeah, again, understanding the common data engineering patterns is extremely useful for this exam. My next tip here is to study the data flowcharts. The data flowcharts are what I'm about to show you. So if you haven't seen these, that's okay. So this particular diagram here is something that my colleague built out, but it is a useful resource. So I mentioned the exam guide earlier. The exam guide has particular products listed out, and this is more of like a condensed view of that. So if you're kind of watching this and you're like, what are the actual products that we're talking about? Well, this is a helpful slide to kind of show you in what actual area it's related to in the exam. So I'm not going to go through every single one here, but it's useful to see, okay, I'm a data engineer. What kind of data products should I know? Well, maybe for storage, you should look at cloud storage and BigQuery storage in particular. So again, not going to go through this. It's definitely something that's useful to review in your own time. This particular slide is a flowchart, and I find this extremely useful not only for the professional data engineer, but if you're someone who's interested in the associate cloud engineer or the professional cloud architect, this is an extremely useful slide because it diagrams in your mind the decision tree between what data base or data decision product that am I going to choose. So again, I'm not going to go through every single product here, but in your mind, you can kind of think through this, right? So if I want to choose something like BigQuery, I can start at the top and I can say, is my data structured? Yes, the data has to be structured to be in BigQuery. Maybe it's a workload analytics workload. Yes, I go down. I don't really need low updates or low latency. So, okay, I'm going to choose BigQuery. So I would highly suggest you may in your mind work your way through this diagram so that you can fully understand, okay, when would I actually choose one of these products? And when you're reading through a question in particular, okay, maybe I can go through this diagram in my mind. Is this data structured? Yes, it told me it is structured data. It mentioned all of these things, and okay, now I can choose this product, and it's actually in an option. So again, another really important slide to review in your own time. This is the final diagram that I have for you all. This is, a very similar slide, but it's between our data transformation tools. And so if you're someone who wants to do data transformation and maybe you can accomplish the same task using data proc or data flow, but this is kind of specifically calling out if you're familiar or if you have dependencies on the Apache Hadoop Spark ecosystem, then maybe you would want to go with data proc. But if not, maybe you want a more serverless approach, you can use Cloud Data Flow. And so both of these tools can accomplish the same, types of transformations, but it just depends on the particular questions that this flowchart is calling out. Okay. A couple more tips here. One for the exam is to opt for answers that reduce operational overhead. So what does that mean? So this is an actual example, and it has nothing to do with data, actually. This is just to call out this particular tip. So it's not even important to read this question, but I really want to focus on B and C. And so in the option B, for example, they're telling you to move a workload to a self-managed Kubernetes cluster versus C, which is use a regional cluster. So in this case, B and C can actually accomplish the same task. You can do the same thing. But B is telling you to do something self-managed. And so in general, within cloud or in this exam or in all of these exams, doing something self-managed is not necessarily where we want to go. So I'd highly encourage someone who's taking the exam to consider options that would reduce operational overhead. If the option mentions something like, writing a script or doing something manual, I would hesitate to choose those answers, but I would instead opt for the option that goes for Google Cloud or that opts for reducing operational overhead. So in this case, the answer was C. We're avoiding options where they require manual work that managed services can offer. And we're crossing that one out. Okay. Next couple of tips here are just actually very general for all of the exams. So study the resource hierarchy. For all of the exams, it's important to know the resource hierarchy within Google Cloud. So if you're not familiar with this, it's definitely good to know. Knowing at least what an organization node is, what are folders, and what are projects is extremely important. Because in this exam, they will ask you not only about data products, but how does this fit into the resource hierarchy? How can I assign permissions? How can I assign security after I've deployed my data pipeline? Those are all super important. So just know that resources can be grouped under folders and under projects. Projects are our lowest level resource that our resources are attached to. So again, something to definitely study in your own time. Going off of the resource hierarchy, it's also extremely important to understand the permission hierarchy. So assigning permissions, whether that be to a user or to a service account or to a group, these are questions that are going to come up within the exam. And a lot of times they're going to ask you questions, okay, like my data engineering group needs access to the data. What kind of permission am I going to assign to them? So just knowing that this is also related to the resource hierarchy, right? So if I apply a permission at the folder level, that it's going to cascade down. If I assign it at a parent level, it's going to cascade down into the child level. So again, this is super important. There's a lot of different types of permissions and who you can assign those to. I'm not going to go over all of that right now, but again, it's super important not only for this exam, but for all of the exams that we offer. Okay, my final tip, super related to the last one. I don't have an example of this, but apply principle of least privilege. So if you are assigning permissions to a user or a service account, you always should give the least amount of privilege for that user or account to do their job, right? So if the question is calling out, hey, I want to read data from my storage bucket, they shouldn't have any more permission other than to read. So you might want to assign that person like the storage object reader role. So it's really important. I think sometimes they call out, not only in this exam, but all exams, you shouldn't be giving a user or a service account any more permission than it requires. And so this comes up again and again in the questions. So that was all my tips for you. Thank you for listening. I appreciate everyone listening today. And I know we have a lot of Q&A and that sort of thing, but I think I'm going to pass it off to Lauren to talk about what's next.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carrie and Andrew, for all of this information about the exam and the topics that are covered in it. Thank you, everyone who's with us, and your questions. For those we haven't gotten to, we will be sure to address them. And we are seeing a lot of questions around sharing the links or the resources that we're mentioning. So we are adding as many as we can into the chat. There's also a couple of resources to the certification page, the cloud community, the learning community in the YouTube description. But with all of that said, the recording will be available as soon as we close out today from the same YouTube link. And we'll be sharing a recap post with all of the links, resources, and written Q&A in the Google Cloud community shortly after. So stay tuned for that. And we will also be sending it to you if you registered for this event today. And with that in mind, just a few more things before we dive into your questions. We have that link to the community there at the top. We'd love if you would join with us if you haven't yet, to stay up to date on all things cloud, Google, and learning and certifications. That second link is a feedback form. So we'd love to hear from you about this session, ideas for future topics, anything that you have in mind. We'd really love to hear your feedback and input so that we can help better meet your needs. And then lastly are just a few other upcoming events that can help supplement your learning or just equip you and enable you on different topics around Google Cloud. So we have a couple coming up on FinOps, security, our partnership with HashiCorp Terraform, and cloud observability. So you can check those all out with that third link there. Okay, enough of that. We'll go to the next slide, and then we can start taking in some of your questions.
Okay. Should we start? We're starting with these questions, right?
Yeah, let's start here, and then we're going to mix in some of the live chat to make sure that we're addressing those live questions as well. And there are some overlaps, so we will get to your questions. But this first one here is, what are some practical projects or use cases that I can start working on to gain hands-on experience with Google Cloud data engineering tools and technologies? And how can I effectively leverage Python and SQL skills in these projects?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I have a little bit of a response for whoever asked this. And so there are a ton of practical projects or use cases that you can start working on to gain hands-on knowledge within the Google Cloud data engineering tools. One thing I would want to mention is also the Google Cloud Skills Boost, which I talked about earlier, they have a lot of labs and hands-on materials that you can actually use to spin up your test environment. And they have a lot of these kind of projects drawn out for you. So you can definitely utilize those to utilize your Python and SQL skills. Again, like I mentioned earlier, the common data engineering patterns, something like ETL or ELT, so extracting some data from the source, transforming it, and then loading it into something like BigQuery, for example. That's also another great project for someone to get started with. You can use different products like Dataflow or Dataproc to transform that and then load it into various sources. Something like data visualization is something you can also use. So we actually do have sort of a notebook style tool as well. So if you're someone who's familiar with using like Python pandas notebooks or like Jupyter notebooks, we have an equivalent within Google Cloud where you can use your Python skills there. And then one final thing I want to mention is that Google Cloud maintains a public pub subtopic. So if you're someone who wants to get some sample data, you can use a public topic, and I think we can probably put that link in later. But we can provide like real-time taxi data if that's something that you want to like change or manipulate and then load it into a different database. You could use Python and SQL to do that. And then same with BigQuery, we have public data sets where you could actually do transformation within that. So there are a ton of different options. And so, yeah, I think it might be good to send out a few links about this one.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Our next question is there any GCP solution that may help with cleaning and fixing raw data, such as auto-populate missing elements, unify formats, turn date to one format, for example, or convert digital fields and strings to a string format, etc.?
Yeah. So this is a quick response. We do have a product called Google Cloud Data Prep. It's a self-service data preparation tool that can help you clean and fix raw data. So it can automatically do the things like you're saying, populate missing elements, unify formats, and convert digital fields to strings. So yeah, short answer there, data prep.
Awesome. All right. Should we know data science before applying for this certification?
So it's not required to have a background in data science before applying for this exam. It would definitely be helpful and beneficial knowledge to have some familiarity with data science concepts. So it'll help you kind of to have that background. And so in this exam, they actually do mention that you should have a high level knowledge of machine learning, which data scientists might have some experience with. So it's definitely useful for information, but it's not necessary.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Andrew, I can pop some introductory data science courses from Google Cloud Skills Boost in the chat as well.
Awesome. Perfect.
Awesome. And just a follow up to that around machine learning, we had a question. I'm interested in the machine learning engineer certification. Is it necessary to pass this PDE certification first? And I'll take a stab and just say that no, it is not, but kind of along the lines of what Andrew said, that there are similar topics and themes that are covered. So it could be helpful and beneficial for you if you went through some of the learning courses or materials. But again, there's no official prerequisite to taking this exam.
Yeah, I don't have much to add there other than the data engineering does cover high-level machine learning. And so some of that content is a little overlapping, but it's definitely not necessary.
Sounds good. Okay, our next question, we'll take another one from the live chat here, is how can we use Google Cloud as a business intelligence tool if suppose we are highly focused on creating BI report to customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can use we have several different tools for BI. I'm not particularly experienced in one of them, but Looker is kind of like our flagship BI product. So if you're looking at something for like reporting or dashboarding, Looker is a great tool for that. We used to have a product called Data Studio, which I think is now called Looker Studio. And so that is actually our free version of Looker, if I'm not mistaken. And so you can actually make reporting and dashboards on top of your BigQuery data sets by just clicking in the UI. So there are a couple of different tools that layer on top of other tools like BigQuery for BI. So I don't have much else to add there other than Looker and Looker Studio.
Awesome. All right, one question here. Will signing up for the cloud free trial allow us to get used to the products such as Dataflow, Dataproc, PubSub, BigQuery, and machine learning notebooks?
Yeah, I think, Lauren, Carrie, I think the free trial, I think might be, they give you some amount of money, like $300 to sign up for Google Cloud, I believe, in credits. I think so. So if you're getting $300 in credits, just do anything you want when you start out. it's definitely enough to get started in these products. So like BigQuery has a free tier, for example. So you can store data, you can run queries for free at a certain point. A lot of these products have free tiers. I think I'm trying to think about maybe how expensive these things would be, but you can definitely run these products for a limited amount of time with your $300 credit. I would definitely suggest, though, maybe like it would be more cost effective to use Skills Boost and to run these things in like a test environment, so that you're not constantly paying for these things. And then if you bring them up, then you can easily take them down when you're done. So the answer is yes.
Perfect. And we just dropped a link to more information about the free trial and what is included in that, so you can take a closer look there. All right, thanks everyone for your questions. We've seen one or a few that are similar to this one. So how can we access paid learning paths? Is there a student discount available? And then there were some other questions about vouchers or discounts in general.
Yes, I would love to talk about vouchers and discounts. I can share a link in the chat, which is the link to our basic FAQ about vouchers and discounts. Also, the Google Cloud community is a great place to find answers if you can't find them on the FAQ page. And there is a link that I am sharing right now. And this is a post that's in our learning forums that will tell you how you can get credit sharing so that you can consume Skills Boost material with free shared credits, which is great because it helps you save money while you're learning. There's also Google Cloud Skills Boost has a subscription, which is $29 a month, and that gives you unlimited access to the course materials. You might be eligible for a 30-day trial also if you're a new user, so that's always worth checking out. The other thing that I would definitely recommend, particularly if you're going to take the certification exam, is looking at the Innovators Plus subscription. It is $299 for a year, but considering that a certification voucher is or certification exam is $200, it's really not that big of a difference. And with that subscription, you get access to the entire on-demand Google Cloud Skills Boost catalog, and you do get a certification voucher. You also get, I believe it's up to 1,000 credits, Google Cloud credits. So more than that, 300 with that other trial, because it is paid, but that gives you ample opportunities to get some practical experience before your exam. Also, if you are a veteran, professional data engineer exam is one of the exams that is reimbursable by the US government. So I can also share the links I have about that in there. And let's see, vouchers and discounts. Oh, and the other thing is that if you're in the Google Cloud community, in the Learning Hub, we do often have learning challenges and learning campaigns. And those are other ways that you can get find discounts and enter into cohorts to get maybe reduced cost access to our training materials.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Carrie. I think there's lots to explore there, and we love seeing that you're joining us and you're attending the Google Cloud events. I see in the comments. And if we haven't shared any of those additional resources yet, we will shortly. Okay. Moving right along, what other technologies outside of Google Cloud would help with this certification or be helpful as a GCP data engineer?
Yeah, I think the ones that you listed, Paul, are definitely great technologies to know if you're going to use Google Cloud. So when you're using something like BigQuery, obviously SQL for ETL or ELT, something like Python or Java. So if you're using Dataflow or Apache Beam, that can run in Java or Python. So it would be good to be familiar with either of those if you're choosing to use that tool. It really just depends on what kind of you want to focus in, right? So if you're using something like Hadoop or Dataproc, you might want to be familiar with like Apache Spark and all the open source tools that I mentioned. Like if you know Airflow, then you can be familiar with Cloud Composer. It might also be useful to understand, like, calling an API. If you don't want to work directly with the console, it's easier to just kind of call that API to spin things up and take things down. It might also be useful to know Terraform, which isn't directly related to professional data engineer, but if you want to spin up like a database or a different product in like an infrastructure as code fashion, it might be useful to know Terraform. So there's just like a few of the other technologies, but I think the ones that you mentioned are actually the most useful to know as a data engineer.
Awesome. Okay, how does cloud partner learning differ from the Coursera content?
That is a good question.
That is a great question. It's a wonderful question. I'm equipped to answer one interpretation of it, but I'm not sure if that's the meaning you have behind the question. We do have learning partners. We have Coursera and Pluralsight are both sites that we offer our learning content on. It's all content that we endorse, so you can feel happy and knowledgeable going to either Coursera or Pluralsight to consume learning content. Obviously, you can also go to Google Cloud Skills Boost, but you can definitely use either of those. If you are asking about learning for our partners, that I do not know the answer to, but if you want to put your question back in the chat, I can figure out someone to get that answer, and then we can include it in some FAQs when we send out a wrap-up.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that a little bit further and make sure to include the response in the recap. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay. One question here is around, will GCP be helpful for my course? It looks like business tech, AI, and ML, and can I make a career in it? I will address the second half of that question, and just to say that yes, definitely. There is also a series that our team is doing in developer marketing around cracking the Google Cloud career code, which is helpful for anyone who is looking to get into a career in cloud. So I'll drop a link to one of the blog posts there that you can explore further resources, and that can be helpful for you to understand what kind of careers are out there and what options are available to you, and if there's any gaps that you might need to fill in your learning and training to be able to meet those. But hopefully that's helpful. Does the team have anything else to add to that question?
No, I think you covered most of it. I'm not sure if it'll be helpful for the course, but I know it can't hurt. So I think the AI ML stuff, like, it might be more related to our machine learning exam, but I don't think the data engineering techniques would also hurt at all to know.
Perfect. Okay, I think we'll go back to some of the pre-submitted questions, but please keep asking in the chat and we'll be sure to get to those. We have just about 5 or so minutes left. So if you don't mind going to the next one, Andrew.
Yeah. So one of the submitted questions was, what is the difference between data analytics and data science? And so I think this is definitely up to some interpretation, but they're both fields that deal with data, but they have different focuses. Data analytics is the process of extracting like meaningful insights from your data. So cleaning it, organizing it, and then analyzing it to identify like patterns and trends. And so you might use like a variety of tools and techniques, some statistical analysis, and some visualization. But data science is more of like, it's more of a broader field, I would say, that encompasses data analytics as well. So data scientists they might use data analytics to extract insights from their data, but then they also use more other techniques such as machine learning or natural language processing to develop new products and services. So the main difference is that the data analyst is focusing on extracting insights, while data scientists are focused more on developing like new products and services using the data. So yeah, at a high level, that is what I would say the difference is, but again, up to interpretation.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, I think we have a few more. At what level the architect should have knowledge of data engineered to provide the right estimates or the usage of right tools?
Yeah, so I assume this question was gearing towards our other examination, which is the professional cloud architect. And so maybe they're asking, what should a professional cloud architect have in knowledge in terms of data engineering? And so I would definitely say the data flowchart that I mentioned earlier, which has like the decision tree of which product that you should choose, that's extremely useful to know for the cloud architect exam. And I would also just check out the cloud architect guide. So just like the exam guide I mentioned earlier, the exam guide for the cloud architect, it's going to mention every single time you see data in there, you're going to want to review that. So yeah, that's my answer for professional cloud architect.
Awesome. Okay. So we've already covered this one a little bit, but would you mind outlining the free resources one should take advantage of in becoming an expert on this platform for the certification?
Yeah. So I put a link in earlier, but I will put another one in of the data engineer learning path in Google Cloud Skills Boost, and you'll be able to see which courses are no cost. When you enroll into most courses, you'll be able to consume course materials like videos and documents for free. But if there are labs, then you will need to purchase either an individual subscription or credits to be able to consume those labs. As I mentioned earlier, there are ways to get credits with no cost associated for you, namely participation in our community, and credit sharing is a really popular way to do that. And labs can also be unlocked by any of our learning campaigns that you participate in. But all of the required activities in the course must be completed to be awarded the completion badge. That being said, the completion badge isn't necessary to take your certification exam. And if you pass your certification exam, you might not have a completion badge, but you'll have your certification. We do recommend, obviously, completing the course, mostly because it is the most robust way to study for the exam. But if you have those videos and documents and you feel confident in your existing knowledge and just need those to kind of create your own study guide yourself, then that is also a totally no cost way to get things done. And if you are a new learner, you do get 30 days free, which that link is also in the chat, but I'm going to put that learning path link in there right now.
I just added it, Carrie, so
thank you.
Perfect.
Great.
Awesome. And earlier in the presentation, we did cover a slide that links to the product documentation, the YouTube channel, and a data engineer study guide from O'Reilly. So those are some additional resources that you can tap into. And I love seeing Cloud Skills Boost is the best free resource in the chat. So we tend to agree. So thank you. And I also want to highlight, celebrate that one of our folks joining us today just completed the course and they're feeling accomplished. So that's amazing to see. Huge congrats. We love to see it. Okay. I think we have just a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up.
This is when I wish I had a real live version of the party popper emoji so I could celebrate you, Gavin.
Yes, exactly. All right. Can a novice with no coding experience take this course?
I can cover this. So I would say yes. So having no coding experience should not stop you from at least taking the course and understanding the material. I think anyone can kind of learn this content. So it's not necessarily like even in the exam, they're not going to ask you to code. It's more kind of choosing the products that best fit the use case. So yeah, for sure, you do not necessarily need coding, but would be a useful thing to have.
Great. Okay. So can I get credits to prepare voucher for the exam? We've already covered this from the comments in the chat questions. So thanks for asking. Is the new wave in data cloud and AI, namely foundation models and generative AI, tackled in the exam material and Cloud Skills Boost content? I won't read the rest here, but I think that gives us the gist.
Yeah, so the new products have not been integrated into PDE. It's all being the professional data engineer and all the certifications are constantly being updated for new content. And so for the PDE right now, I would say to go look at the exam guide, section 3, operationalizing machine learning models will tell you exactly what you need to know for the exam. And so that's what I would say right now. Take a look at the exam guide, but these kind of newer things are not yet integrated.
I do want to add, because it takes a little bit of time to develop and create and publish learning content. We do try to go as fast as we can, but in your best interest, we want to make sure that it is as accurate and supportive as possible. So it's always a great idea to check out what the latest releases are. Sometimes we have mini courses or we'll have a skill badge that might be related to newer content that won't be showing up on the certification exam itself for a while necessarily, but it is still new content that might help you either learn or validate with the skill badge that new expertise.
Great. Thank you both for that. I know we're just at time, but we had one question here of the O'Reilly Data Engineer Study Guide. Looks like it's an older edition. Does it still cover the latest exam guide?
That's a good question. I want to say it does, but I also would want to check on that. So we did get the official response that it is endorsed and supported. So I would say that at least partially it definitely is. But I think we should definitely look more into that before answering.
Sounds good. We'll get back to you on that. And then lastly, there are a couple of, what experience is needed prior to taking this exam. And as we mentioned, there are no official prerequisites. However, it is recommended that you have at least 3 years of industry experience, including 1 or more years of designing and managing solutions using Google Cloud. So that's what's recommended. But again, no official prerequisites to take and pass the exam. Okay. With that, if you have any other further questions, we will be collecting them and addressing them in that recap post in the community. But thank you so much, Carrie, Andrew, for sharing your knowledge and answering our questions today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you are embarking on your certification journey, we wish you the best of luck. And we'd love to hear about your success or your lessons learned in the community. So we'd love to see you there. Any final thoughts before we close out from either of you today?
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. And I love, Lauren, what you just said about sharing your successes, but also your lessons learned. There's plenty of lessons to learn in this path. So don't get discouraged. Come to the community, ask your peers. It's a really great supportive place.
Awesome. And we did drop the link to the event feedback form. If you do have a minute, it doesn't take long just to tell us what you thought. If there's a topic you'd like to see next, anything you have to share, we'd love to hear from you. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks again, Carrie and Andrew.
Say we wave, right?